where, so hopefully we'll have some people come on.
Yeah, I was sharing it too.
Hmm. Yeah.
Let me put it on Do Not Disturb.
Okay. Make sure we on. Let's see what we got. Okay. All right. I'm gonna wait a few minutes and wait for some viewers to come on because I got questions.
I'm ready.
Yeah, I got some. I was rereading everything because I read through it the first time I got it, and then I ordered some more copies because I'm giving a copy to each winner of the reading challenge, each age group of the
Okay.
reading challenge to get a copy of the book as well, and then I want to raffle a copy as well as a fundraiser for Ashe.
I appreciate that so much. Appreciate that so much.
Mhm.
See,
Mhm.
I shouted y'all out in one of the chapters.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. I need to actually find that page.
It's the one on the chapter. Should we drive or fly?
Okay, yeah, yeah. And I actually used that a couple weeks ago because I was going to go to Charlotte. My youngest daughter has an internship, and they all went to Charlotte last week. I was like, okay, should I fly or should I drive?
Right. Yeah.
So I used that, and I ended up not even going because I had the dog sit for her.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
page 68.
right. Got it. Got it. Got it. Got it.
Found it.
I was watching a video with you and Kwame a few minutes ago. It's so cute.
Yeah, we about to do some more of those. Actually, I'm gonna go get him from Baltimore and bring him back to Philly next week. So he's gonna spend a week with me,
Mhm.
and we're gonna do some subtraction with numbers less than five. So like 5-2, 5-3, 5-4. Uh,
Mhm.
we might get into the numbers between 5 and 10. But I was showing him that the other day how like with subtraction you take the fingers away,
Mhm.
just take away.
Cool.
And
Yeah, Kizzy, she spent the summer learning her multiplication table, so she's
right,
super proud because she feel like she ahead of the game,
yeah,
her class. So she was like, "It's easy." And the day they did something, she told me they were rounding, they were rounding numbers today. She said, and so she was all excited because she was like, "It was super easy."
yeah. Wow.
And I was telling my cousin about those ginger mints Saturday. We were in Arkansas at the fun day, and I had some items on the table, some sage and some soap and everything. So Kenzie was walking around trying to sell everybody some sage and soap.
Was she selling the candy too?
Now we have any ginger mints.
Yeah,
Yeah, she is something when it comes to that because she was telling people she was trying to save her money for college. So I was like, that's a great sale pitch
it,
because people love to hear that.
it, it.
Hmm. All right. Well, 6:05. I don't see anybody on yet. Let's see. I'm gonna share it one more time. Okay, let's see. Oh, I know why. I know why. I don't know why I did my privacy to only me. Hold on. That's why. That works. Okay, let me try it again. For some reason, I had to change the privacy settings because it wasn't showing up, and it's not showing up. I guess. Hold on. Okay, here we go. All right, we can go ahead and get started. See a couple people on. So here we are again. Read Black with me. Of course, y'all know I'm Crystal Denise, and I'm happy and honored and privileged to have Brother Akil on again. And we're going to talk a little bit about his project and some other things that are coming up. But first, let me introduce you all to him. Brother Akil is the founder and CEO of All This Math, an organization offering private math tutoring and educational consultant in the Black community. All This Math was founded in 2017 and later became more of an active entity in 2018 after Akil left his full-time teaching position in the school district of Philadelphia in order to build the organization as well as focus on college level teaching. Prior to leaving the school district of Philadelphia, he had been teaching high school math since the spring of 2005 in a mixture of charter schools, public schools, and extracurricular programs. He currently is also an adjunct professor at Cheney University, where he teaches pure math. We're going to talk about that. What is pure math? As well as math education courses. Having been a two-time graduate of HBCUs, Morgan State, and Lincoln, he understands the value in supporting these institutions as an effort toward independent nation building for Black people. In the evenings, he also teaches in a high school program for adult learners in North Philly, where he stresses to his students the importance of learning mathematics so that can assist their own children with developing their math skills. For Akil, mathematics education is directly connected to the teachings of Malcolm X and Pan African nationalism, since it should be the responsibility of the community to do everything for itself, including educating its own children. His work with All This Math and his formal teaching all speak to the achievement of these goals. He has a long-term goal of mathematics becoming viewed as a useful and accessible problem-solving tool for the Black collective. And let me tell y'all, there is nobody more dedicated to his craft and skill set. And I am so grateful that our paths crossed because he has been such a help to me personally and organizationally and institutionally as well. So welcome, Brother Akil, back to Talk Black with me. Um, how you been doing?
I've been good. I always like coming on your platform. I like working with y'all in general. I'm looking forward to the conference in September also.
Yes, we're gonna talk a little bit about that too. I see Sister Mila is on. Peace, Sister Mila. Thank you for coming on and chiming in. We hope to make this engaging and interactive because I invited everybody, my family, my friends, my co people that I work with, my divine family. I call it that. My
Yeah.
divine family as well. So when I was reading your introduction and in the book itself, you talk about pure math.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, what is pure math?
Well, pure math, as I understand it, it's just a fancy term to describe the typical math courses that we might take in on a college level, or even the ones in high school or middle school, like Algebra 1, Algebra 2, in contrast with the math methods courses that I also teach. Because in the math methods courses at Cheney, what I'm doing is I'm working with education majors that are going to be in the classrooms on the front lines with the young people, And so I'm teaching them not only the content, that some of them might be kind of weak in or might have forgot, but I'm
Mhm.
also different like pedagogy and different methods. So it's like it's kind of twofold in that class. But really that class is the way I kind of flip it and bounce it a little bit is I'm preparing them for being teachers, for being classroom teachers, and what they will expect. Because oftentimes, from my understanding and from my kind of conversation with a lot of educators that have education degrees, a lot of the coursework doesn't really do as good of a job as it could do in terms of preparing them for what they're going to actually encounter when they get into the classroom, when they get that first job, or even when they get into their student teaching. So
Mhm.
I'll be in there trying to have like honest and authentic conversations with them. Like, listen, this what you're going to be up against. This what you might see, and you got to figure out like what are you going to do in that situation? What are you going to do in this situation? Because a lot of the textbooks and the courses that are on their course sequence might not be as real or as raw and have those conversations, with them and prepare them for that. So I just want them to be prepared, you know.
And you said something interesting because a couple weeks ago I was in Jackson at a conference, and it was basically preventing. Well, it was to do away with corporal punishment in schools, and they talked about the preschool to prison pipeline, and there was a panel discussion, and there was a brother from Jackson State on there, and he on the panel, and he was talking about how in the 20 years that he taught at Jackson State in the English department in in education teaching English majors how to be English teachers, he saw so much shift in not focusing so much on the English aspect, but on the education uh, aspect. So a lot of them they know how to use supplements in their teaching to help their students understand the material better. And I was going to ask you about that in math as well. So when you see math majors, is there more focus on like the methods or as opposed to the content?
Well,
Y'all
I
call it.
actually time at Cheney. I've been at Cheney for the past 5 years. I have not encountered one math major that wanted to be a teacher.
Mm,
So I've only encountered education majors. I mean, I've encountered a couple of people that had different majors that took the course just because they
mm,
needed class when they're
mhm,
training. So that was cool. For them, I guess. I mean, for me too. I think I welcome anybody to take the class. But yeah, I haven't actually encountered any math majors, but I think that would be helpful. I actually do think that would be helpful because I think that what often happens is, especially in the elementary school level, there are a lot of people that like children, or
mhm,
they have a positive experience either working at a daycare center or working in a summer camp when they're in high school, and then they decide, you know what, I want to be a teacher. I want to work with young people full time. But then a lot of the same students, they have these like this math anxiety or this math phobia, which usually starts for them around the time they get to high school when they start to get into the algebra and the geometry and the more advanced algebra and the pre-calculus and all of that. So for various reasons, they develop this math anxiety and they're not as successful as they would like to be, but they still want to teach.
mhm,
So they decide to teach elementary school or teach kindergarten or first grade because they feel that they don't need to have that content mastery, right? And still be able to do a good job. And I think they can do an okay job, but part of the problem is if they shy away from the higher level math, then it
mhm,
comes when they're even teaching the basic fundamentals of mathematics, the counting, ordinal numbers, the number line, or even introducing fractions and just those core fundamentals. They're usually not able to make the connections to the higher level math.
okay.
You know, as parents, when we have a newborn baby, or as uncles or aunts or whoever, we concerned about our nieces and nephews, we're concerned about our children, and we want to provide for them and try to help them to grow, but we don't just want them to grow a month older. Like, we're thinking long term. Like one day, this is going to be a functional adult human being that is
Mm-hmm.
responsible, that's going to have to make decisions using critical thinking. They're going to be responsible for their own family. They're going to be responsible for their own household. So what we do with them, ideally as parents and as uncles and aunts and elders in the community, what we do with them and how do we try to develop them when they're 1 years old, when they're babies, when they're 2 years old, when they're 3 years old, when they're 5 years old. The conversations we're having with them and the way we're trying to mold them is in preparation for that long-term goal of them
Mm-hmm.
being human beings as adults. But in terms of like mathematics training, mathematics development, oftentimes if the teacher on that early level doesn't have a grasp of the content on the higher level, then the way they present the curriculum, the way they present the mathematics instruction, it's gonna be there's gonna be something missing there, right? Because even just the connections, like a lot of times I'll be like, um, I'll be teaching somebody, I'll be tutoring somebody or teaching in a homeschool group, and we'll be talking about a fundamental concept like multiplying fractions, and then I'll connect it to something in calculus, like a calculus concept. And I may not go into the calculus concept, but I'm at least going to mention, like, you know what, when you get to calculus, and that's also
Mm-hmm.
positive reinforcement to
Right.
formalize this idea of them studying calculus, because a lot
Mm-hmm.
phobia of even the word calculus. And
Right.
this, it makes us feel intimidated. It makes us feel uncomfortable. It makes it feel like, oh, I can never do that. That just sounds hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you're talking to young people and you say things like, well, when you get to calculus, you're going to have to do this. You're going to need to know this. So make sure you understand this now because you're going to use it later. These are casual conversations that we can have while we're doing that math instruction on an early level. So my concern is that a lot of teachers that are teaching in the young levels or the early levels, they're not able to make those connections because they don't have that content mastery or even that awareness of the content. Because for them, they kind of either a way that wasn't taught to them or they kind of shied away from it, when they had the option. But I do, I appreciate the fact that, they go into education, but these are some of the conversations that I've had every semester, with
Mm-hmm.
math methods, because I want them to, develop their own math skills, because
Right.
that is like when you develop your own math skills, that tends to address or alleviate some math phobia and math anxiety that we possess as adults at different levels. So it's it's a lot of teachers that are in classrooms in front of children that, every day, 5 days a week. And that's their job. And they're doing their job. They're trying to do it to the best of their ability, but they have their own math anxiety and math phobia that they're dealing with. And sometimes it's very easy for that to get transferred onto the children, because children are like, they might catch the vibe that
Mm-hmm.
you don't really know this.
Right.
You don't really,
Easy.
you don't really know, or he don't really want to do this, or he's not comfortable with this.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times it shows up in different ways. Like sometimes it shows up when it can become triggering for some teachers. Like a child might raise their hand and ask a question about some content, and you as the teacher, you might not have a good answer. So it might make you frustrated. You might get angry, you know, and then you might snap at the child, or if the child might have a history of being disruptive in class, but in this particular moment, they're asking a very valid question about negative numbers, or a valid question about the relationship between certain fractions or proportions or ratios. And if you don't have an answer, then you may end up vilifying that child, right?
Right.
Because it really wasn't about the child's question. It really wasn't about the child. It really was about the question, because you were triggered because you didn't really have a strong conceptual understanding of the math yourself.
Right.
And I think that happens a lot. So I definitely think people need to, if you're going to teach and you're going to be responsible for teaching young children math, I think you owe it to not only to yourself but to that community and to those children, to develop your math skills as much as you possibly can on a regular basis. Just from studying and
Right.
practicing.
Right. My oldest daughter, Brandon, she was hired. She went down to the school district to apply for a teaching assistant position, and somehow they could not transfer her like VOTEC to what the hours that she would need to be the teacher's assistant. So they hired her as a full time substitute for a math fourth grade math class, and she was like, "Okay, I don't know how this is gonna go." And da da da. I said, "So you got a resource. You got Brother Akil and all this math. that's a resource right there. You got to take the initiative. And so we're going to see how it goes. Today was her first day. And she said it wasn't as bad as she thought it was going to be. So it's gonna be interesting. But I just wanted to put that in there because a lot of these teachers, they're being thrown in the classroom
Yeah.
without the proper training, without the proper support to teach math, and so that it affects the children that they work with that already had a math phobia. They are passing it on down through the system, and like Brother Brian said, they don't know the roadmap to move students down the road. And I want to go get moved to the book because we want to talk about this gem, how to use all this math.
Oh, my,
Uh,
uh,
yeah, in the introduction, you said, as a youth, you had a strong uh, math, you were a strong math student, but then when you started tutoring, is where you found out that you lacked the conceptual understanding of math fundamentals. And that's what I want you to talk about, the conceptual understanding, because I think a lot of us don't realize how math builds on things. And when you said fractions is a conceptual understanding, I'm like, what? Most of us think is adding, subtracting, multiplication, and dividing. That's the conceptual understanding. But you said fractions as well. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
yeah. So, I mean, the conceptual understanding is very key because, like myself, I was very good with procedures. Like I was
Mm-hmm.
memorizing procedures, memorizing the steps and the algorithms and all of that. And then I could do the problems and I could get the right answer. So to me, math was a lot like playing video games.
Right.
And I kind of likened the two. So, but if you ask me like, why does it work? Then I couldn't tell you. Or if you presented a problem in a certain way that would require that I understand the concept of like, well, why does division work? Or what is
Mm-hmm.
actually happening when you're dividing two numbers or when you're multiplying two numbers, right? Then, or why do you need to find the least common denominator when you're adding two fractions? Why do you need to even do that, right? I couldn't tell you, or I couldn't work that type of problem out. And
Mm-hmm.
those are often like a lot of the more challenging questions that, when you can answer those questions, you get access to certain things that everybody else don't get access to. And those are the types of questions that you might see on a standardized test. So you
Mm-hmm.
like, do those types of questions from tutoring and also from having to teach the math methods course at Cheney. I had to learn, the conceptual basis of a lot of the things that I had already known how to do, but I didn't really know how to do them like deeply. So, like, take for example, like when we're doing division, um, like eight divided by four, or eight divided by two. Let's say eight divided by two. Like, what does that actually mean? Well, it means a few things, right? So, if you take eight of something and you divide it into two equal parts, how much is going to be in each part, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
one way to interpret division. Um, or if you have eight of something and you want to have equal groups of two, then the question is, how many groups will you have?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's like, I think there are terms for this. It's like partitive and some other term. The terms escape me, but basically, whoever writes a book, just like I use certain terms in my book, right? So it depends on like whose book you're reading. Like the different people, all these different authors have different terms anyway, and then these terms end up infiltrating like school systems and classrooms, and then but a lot of these terms are synonymous. Is the point I'm. But even that, like that concept, like what does that even mean? And then when you get into fractions, like I'll tell you this, like dividing fractions is something I definitely didn't understand as a concept. I know
Right.
how to do it. I know keep, change, flip. Keep the first fraction the same, change it to
Mm-hmm.
a problem, flip the second fraction, take the reciprocal, and then just multiply straight across. I could do it, but I can't tell you like I couldn't for a very long time. I couldn't tell you why it worked. I couldn't tell you,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So then when you think about like fractions as an example, like let's say you had to divide 3/4 divided by 1/2, right? What that means, one way of thinking about that is like how many 1/2s, how many of the second number can fit into the first. So if you're doing 3/4 divided by 1/2, the question that we're asking, or we could restructure that question into how many 1/2s can fit into 3/4. So if you think about that like visually, like let's say you thought about it in terms of money. Let's say
Mm-hmm.
3/4 is 75 cents, and I think a 1/2 is 50 cents. And then I say to myself, okay, well, how many 50 cent, how many 50 cent increments can fit into 75 cents? Now I know a whole 50 cent is less than 75 cents. So the way I reason it is like, okay, so a whole 50 cent can fit into 75 cents, but then there's some left over because you still got that 25 cent left over, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then the question is, how do I represent that 25 cent? Well, 25 cent is exactly half of 50 cent. So that means that one whole 50 cent can fit into 75 cent. And in addition to that, half of another 50 cent can fit into 75 cent. And you put those together, that's how you get 1.5. So that's why 1.5 is what we call a mixed number. It's,
Mm-hmm.
like a mulatto person or something like that, right? Two different races, right?
Mm-hmm.
Two different types of numbers. You got a whole number and you got a fraction, or a whole number and a rational number, right? 1.5. But if you convert 1.5 to a fraction, you got 3/2. So if you do the division, like you do the keep change flip thing, 3/4 divided by 1/2, it's going to be 3/4 times 2, right? Which is going to
Mm-hmm.
be 6/4, or 3/4 times 2/1,
It's six. Yeah.
6/4. You reduce that, and this is when the factoring comes into play, right? Knowing our factors, and knowing your factors is probably, to me, about as important as knowing your multiplication facts, because if you
Mm-hmm.
have factors memorized for all the numbers that usually count with, or multiply with, or add, subtract, or divide with, then that makes math a lot easier. Also, if you just know off the top of your head, okay, I know all the factors of this number. Just kind of like with your favorite artist. Like if somebody's like a Beyonce fan, they know they can list all of her albums from the Destiny's Child days up to now, the most recent album, right? And even
Mm-hmm.
if you're a serious fan, you can list the track listing for each of the albums in order, right? So we could do just like people that follow sports. They know their favorite player, where they went to high school, where they went to college, what their stats were, when they played in the NBA, who were all the NBA teams they played. This is
Mm-hmm.
all data and information attributed to like a person, right? So with numbers, numbers have their own data, their own attributes, their own characteristics. One of those characteristics is the factors of that number. And just knowing the factors of that number, every number is very important. And I say, I mean, not every number, because there's an infinite amount of numbers in the universe, but I would say we should memorize the factors of all numbers from 1 up to 150. Now,
Ooh.
a lot, but one thing you keep in mind is this: a lot of those numbers are prime numbers. Prime numbers meaning the prime numbers only have two factors, one and their self, like seven. Seven's a
Mm-hmm.
1 times 7 is 7. There's no other whole numbers that can multiply together to equal 7. 19, 13, 29, number. It's a bunch of numbers like that. So that eliminates a lot of numbers. Plus, with the composite numbers, the numbers that have multiple factors, more than two factors,
Mm-hmm.
numbers that just doubles and triples or quadruples of earlier numbers.
Hmm.
So you can kind of figure out, okay, well, if I know all the factors of 16, and then I get to 32, and I'm like, okay, what are all the factors of 32? Well, I know 16 is just half of 32.
Mm-hmm.
So all the factors of 16 got to be in the list of factors of 32, and then it might be just a couple of more factors. So it's like these are like building blocks. But we use factors because when we want to reduce fractions or simplify fractions, then like we were talking about 6/4, because we were originally talking about 3/4 divided by 1/2.
Mm-hmm.
6/4, and we break that down into 3/2. So if you could picture it like, 6/4 is the same as 3/2, because
Mm-hmm.
6/4, and then even that, like as a concept, like for a longest time, like I couldn't really tell you. If somebody really pulled me up and said, Akil, what's a fraction? I would have said like a number that's got a numerator and a denominator.
Mm-hmm.
It's said, but
Mm-hmm.
technically that's correct, but that's not a good definition. That's not a good description, right? A fraction is, when you take a quantity of something and you break it up into equal parts, and that's very important too, because then we get into the politics of math and how we can use math to promote, cultural values and cultural norms. Because with fractions, we're talking about equal parts. Every part is equal, and every part is part of the whole. And we talk about like communalism or collectivism. Fractions represent that. So if I got like 6/4, then we're talking about an object with 4 equal parts,
Mm-hmm.
right? But then you say, well, how you gonna have, if you got 4 equal parts all together, how can you add, the numerator tells you how many of those parts you're trying to focus on, right? So I'm trying to focus on 6 of them. But then as a child, you gotta sit back and say, well, that don't make sense.
Right.
Got 4 parts all together, then how can I focus on 6 of them? 6 is more than 4.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we call that an improper fraction.
Okay.
Because what's actually happening is the first 4 out of that 6, the first 4 take up the whole object. And then we got 2 parts left over. So we got to create another object that's broken down into 4 equal parts. And so one object that's broken up into 4 equal parts, like let's talk about pizza as an example. So let's say we got 6 fourths. Let's say we got one whole pizza that's cut into 4 slices. All 4 of those slices are accounted for, right? But then it's 2 more fourths. So then we got another pizza with 4 slices. 2 of those pieces are accounted for, right? So that's where you get your 6 fourths. So when you think about your denominator is like a thing. It's like currency. Like we talk about like dollars in U.S. currency. So you have like, instead of having like $6, in this case, what we were talking about, you got 6 fourths, like fourth or thing. And that's why another thing I suggest for children is to, and even for adults too, and especially parents trying to teach children fractions, is to, when we verbalize the fraction, instead of saying 6/4, say 6 fourths, because we want to get the child to kind of think conceptually, like, because language is a conduit of culture. So the language and the way we speak it is going to help us to understand what we're actually talking about, right? So if we're saying, the denominator tells you how many equal pieces we got, and then the numerator tells you out of those pieces how many we care about, how many we focus on. We say, well, we're focused on 6 what though? 6 fourths. So, and that's also why, like, this ties into like addition and subtraction, why you never add or subtract the denominators. Because it's kind of like if somebody says, well, I had $5 and then I got $4 more. Altogether, I got $9. I only add the 5 and the 4. I don't add the word dollars to the word dollars, because the dollars is just like the medium of exchange. Same thing with fractions. If I'm doing like 2/3 and 4/3, I only add the 2 and the 4 because I want to know how many thirds do I have all together, right? So that's another way to like explain, like, well, because it's easy. A lot of children forget that, you never add the denominators. You keep the same, because the denominators is like, it's like your denomination, like that's like your currency, like that's like your medium of exchange. So that just goes to tell you, like, okay, well, how many of that, the number on the top, how many of those do you have of that thing? And that thing is the denominator. So, but this is, like anybody listening to me talk about all this might sound very confusing and very complex. But another thing with math is it's got to be practiced. So if this is like the first time you're hearing it this way, it's supposed to sound confusing. It's very like complex and convoluted. It's supposed to sound that way. But when you look at it like over and over again, it starts to make sense. So like I'm describing it a little bit in the book, and it'll make a little bit more sense. And then I'm also going to have by the middle of this month, I plan to have like some video content that aligns with each chapter from the book. So people will be able to go to the YouTube channel and say, okay, I really like this chapter seems interesting. The chapter on negative ages, that seems interesting. But what is he by that? Like, how can I best, implement that in my household? I'm gonna have a video or maybe a couple videos on like those topics,
And what he's referring to, y'all, for those who just came on, because I see Sister Naki Tia and Brother Edward Hawkins, and Brother Brian and Sister Monique. One thing I do want to share a comment, because Sister Mila said that anxiety that the teachers have is real, and she could feel it when while she was in school, and a lot of things didn't make sense until she got to college, and so that's dangerous to not to have it not make sense until you get to college. And then, Brother Brian said if there's a real math teacher shortage. And I know there is, thousands of children that have not had certified math teachers at critical points in their education. And, that's something that we're going to talk about, because it's addressed in this book as the school should not be the primary learning institution for our children.
Right.
Yeah. You
Yeah,
know, you should.
and the thing about with the lack of preparation in teachers, like a lot of times if you're teaching math, like let's say when you get to like the middle school level and you're teaching a single content area, a lot of other adults in the building are intimidated by math. So a lot of times you get to hide your weaknesses
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of other people feel like, they're not going to call you out. They're not going to check you or challenge you because they're like, well, I'm scared of math myself.
Right.
For them, but they might come in your room and something crazy might be going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then they might not feel confident to even address it or even try to offer you some support, right? Because they feel like, oh, it's math, you know. I don't know math. I'm intimidated by math myself, so now I can't say nothing because I don't know, I don't feel confident enough.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. And it's crazy because last week I had a young lady inbox me and ask me did I do any tutoring. And if I did, how much I would charge. And I told her, well, we'll be up here on Tuesdays we're gonna be doing culturally relevant teaching, here, CRT. And so I was like, what do you need tutoring in? And I knew she was gonna say math, of course. Her daughter is in going to the second grade. And I said, so what specific uh subjects do you need help with? And of course, she said math. So I'm like, oh, let me direct you to my good brother's YouTube channel, All This Math, because he has the content right there. I said his name is Akil Parker. Even if you just go to him on Facebook, he can direct you to the specific video that you need and your daughter need help with. And that's what I tell people all the time because I was looking at Brother Edward's comment. He was like, keep up the good work. Math is everything. It is, and I'm learning that. And since our paths cross, I'm really learning how important it is and how it can be incorporated into almost anything that you do, for real. And that's why this book is so important. Y'all need to go to Amazon and order your copy of How to Use All This Math. Because I do want to talk about in the introduction. I'm just in the introduction, y'all. And in this paragraph starts with mathematical proficiency also helps to develop critical thinking that our children all need, that we all need. And speak to that a little bit, kind of elaborate on that because you use examples in here, you know, how to think through the politics, things that affect our everyday life.
Yeah, so I'm a firm believer that mathematics is the best subject, not the only subject, but the best subject for developing critical thinking ability in our people and in our children. Similar to how, as a parallel, I think of it as like a parallel to one of the famous Malcolm X quotes, where he states that of all of our studies, history is best suited to reward our research. So
Mm-hmm.
that I think mathematics is best suited to develop us in the areas of critical thinking, because that's all you're really doing, with mathematics. It's just, looking at problems, learning how to identify problems, learning how to identify the key elements within the problem, and then, you utilize like formulas and, different theories to try to come up with solutions.
Mm-hmm.
And it trains you in terms of like how to think systematically and how to think in an organized manner, and then it's transferable. Like now one of the issues is that with young people, oftentimes we don't see the relevance
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of times because we're young and like
Right.
brain's not even fully developed. So that's part of the issue right there. But that same ability that you're developing in math class, when you're solving a quadratic equation using the quadratic formula, the way you approach a problem like that is the way you may have to approach a problem in a step-by-step, systematic, methodical way when you're dealing with like your husband or your wife, girlfriend or boyfriend, supervisor at your job, somebody on the phone with you on customer service when you're trying to get money back for a service you didn't receive or something like that, right? You rented an Airbnb and the service was horrible, or they, changed your location at the last minute. And you're like, okay, they tell you that the new property is a comparable property that they put you in, but it's not really a comparable property. So then you're like, okay, I have a problem. I need some of my money back because what we paid for is not what we actually received. So in actuality, we were actually stolen from. But even that, like even thinking about it like that, and being able to understand that if you pay for something, right? And now this takes us back to the Jim Crow era, Jim Crow South, Jim Crow North, the Jim Crow America, right? Apartheid America, right? Where when discrimination is taking place, that also has a serious economic aspect of it because it's theft. Because if you discriminate from me and there's a public bus, right, that everybody's got to pay for. So the white people pay $1 to get on the bus. I pay $1 to get on the bus. So the white people get to sit in the clean, comfortable part of the bus, right? That's what their dollar pays for. But I pay the same dollar, right? But I can't sit in the comfortable, clean part of the bus. So if I could apply a value, or if I could evaluate the worth of the portion of the section of the bus that I sit in as a black person, that section of the bus, I might say that's only worth 10 cents, but I paid you $1. So now, okay, I paid you $1. You gave me something that's worth 10 cents. There's the difference there. So that's why children have to know how to do mathematics, because when you do mathematics, you realize how much somebody is stealing from you on a regular basis. Because $1 minus 10 cents is 90 cents. So now I realize, okay, so what discrimination is doing and what Jim Crow is actually doing is stealing 90 cents from me every time I get on the bus. You're robbing without a gun. Like you're robbing me without a gun because I end up paying for something that I'm not receiving. I'm receiving a substandard product or a substandard service, but I'm paying a certain amount. And other people are getting what they pay for, but I'm not getting what I pay for. All of that is like it's a mathematical lens through which you can view the world. So one of the dangers of not learning mathematics and not becoming comfortable with mathematics and also buying into the very popular and overwhelming propaganda around mathematics that it is irrelevant is that you'll never be able to see situations like that for what they really are. And then what happens is when we do think about discrimination, when we do think about racism, we do think about, issues like that, we end up getting caught up and boxed into the moral arguments, the moral aspect. And, we end up having these conversations about, well, why are these white people so evil? Why are these white people so bad? It's like, that's not even important. Like, I don't care about none of that. Well, let's talk about the money. Let's talk about sense, right? Because that's something that, we can have a more critical and objective conversation about that. Because it's like, no, you're stealing from me. Like, I can't allow you to steal from me. But before you even understand that you're being robbed, you have to be able to look at things through a mathematical lens. And there's so many examples of that, like just throughout society, where we just start to look at the world through the mathematical lens, then you start to understand things. You're like, wait a minute, okay. So if that's doing that, or they doing this, and then we doing okay. So you start to, see things very differently. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Because now it's like, you're awake now.
Mm-hmm. And that leads me because brother where is Brian said history, and I think that he's saying that that's the most important subject. But we're talking about critical thinking, because if you don't have that math, you can't even evaluate slavery. Like Brother Patrick said, you and I had a conversation one time where he introduced you to the idea of quantification of slavery, and that's kind of what you were just doing, quantification of Jim Crow right there.
Right.
How we could show our children how this astronomical wealth was produced and go from there. Because when I was reading, I was doing a lesson plan on Henrietta Lacks, and the whole medical industry and how they have gotten earned, or I won't even say earned, stolen billions of dollars by using her cells. And you think about that, because you might not even think, well, whatever. And then when you think about that, the wealth that was generated off this one person that didn't even know what was going on, it better helps you think about, wait a minute, okay, so if they did that to her, what else had they been doing? And just like you said, if they, you think about riding on the back of the bus, oh, that's, $1 minus 10 cents. They've been stealing 90 cents from me every time I get on the bus. So how much money are we talking about?
But again, and a lot of us, we don't think of it like that, because we know it's something wrong with it. We're like, we know, okay, well, you're making me sit in the dirty part of the bus. So it's you might just interpret it as just, oh well, these people are being mean to me. They're not being nice to me. They're
Mm-hmm.
disinity. But it goes much deeper than that, because
Right.
it's like the 90 no they're really stealing from you. It's
Right.
almost ran up in your house and they're taking money out of your dresser or whatever, like every single day. But they
Right.
figured out a way to engineer it where it doesn't seem like theft to the person that only sees things on the superficial surface level, right? So these are the things that we got, and that's why I am a believer that there's no coincidence that so many people are programmed essentially to fear math and have math anxiety and math phobia, because once you start to embrace math, once more of us especially, we start to embrace math, we start to run toward math, and then math becomes this tool that we use on a regular basis, and math influences our worldview, and mathematical thinking influences how we think and how we process information at all times.
Mm-hmm.
Now we can start to understand what's going on, and we can start to think about ways to effectively challenge these systems and push back on them, in ways that will have definite tangible results.
Mm-hmm.
um so yeah, it's all about, and that's but again, those what we just discussed is can be kind of abstract for some people, so they won't really understand it necessarily.
Yeah.
um just thinking methodically, knowing how to put together a plan, understanding how to even identify a problem, right? Because math, that's another thing I've been saying recently, that I see math as synonymous with problem solving. So if math is synonymous with problem solving, if I can convince you to disregard math, what I've also done simultaneously is I've convinced you to disregard problem solving. So once you disregard problem solving, now, if I'm a person or a part of an entity that benefits from you having this problem, then I'm going to be safe. My benefit maintained. Because
Mm-hmm.
the moment that you learn how to solve your problem, now you have created a problem for me. So because this is another math concept. So this is what we call, and I'm not very well versed in this, but I know I have a limited understanding of it. But there's a branch of mathematics called game theory. So
Mm-hmm.
in the capitalist system, we're dealing with zero sum 2-player game theory, where when I win, somebody else loses. When somebody else wins, I lose, right? So again, back to my example about the problem. If I have a problem, then somebody else is benefiting from my problem. And that's something else that we have to teach our children at an early age. Always think about who's benefiting, because oftentimes we look at problems that we have and
Mm-hmm.
focus only on the problem aspect and the negative aspect, without thinking about, well, who's benefiting from this? Because
Right.
if we don't know who benefits from my problem or our problem, then the people that are actually benefiting, we might end up in a space where they're coming to the community meeting and they're trying to make us believe, and they end up successfully making us believe that we're all on the same side. But at the same time, it's like, wait, but when I'm analyzing the problem and I'm looking at, okay, who benefits, and there's a Latin phrase called cui bono that means that, like, who benefits. That's the translation of it, who benefits, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then we'll be like, you know, all buddy buddy with people that are actually created the problem and are maintaining the problem because they're benefiting from the problem. All
Right.
because it took the time to approach the situation mathematically and think about, well, who's benefiting from this, right? Because everything's got a balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it all, the way the media spins a lot of stuff is like, oh, everybody's benefiting. Oh, it's a problem. Let me take that back. I didn't mean to say that. I meant to say it's a problem for everybody. No, it can't be a problem for everybody, right? It can't be a problem for everybody. There's got to be some people benefiting from this, or else there'd be no incentive for it to be maintained. So well, we talk about, a lot of times the media will sensationalize things and often focus on a problem per se, but we got to think about, like, well, who's benefiting? Because if we think about who's benefiting, then we say, okay, well, who's the real enemy? And that's how you really solve a problem too. You remove the incentive, you remove the benefit. So math is problem solving. Math teaches us how to problem solve from the early stages and the fundamentals up to algebra, geometry, um, Geometry, all geometry is just, well, a significant portion of geometry is learning how to understand rules in the context of shapes and how different shapes relate to each other, different parts
Mhm.
of a polygon, parts of a circle, parts of a triangle, parts of squares, rectangles, or what have you, how they relate to each other. And it's a lot of different rules. And then what we're trying to do is solve problems based on those rules. So we take these rules and we apply them. Just like when a lawyer is practicing, right?
Mhm.
And they say,
Mhm.
hey, well, there's case law that I can apply in this situation. And I go to that case law and I apply it. So then, as us, if we have a problem, we're like, okay, well, what did our ancestors do in this same type of situation?
Right.
How did they apply that? Or what did these people do to our ancestors 100 years ago?
Right.
Like, how did they handle us, and how did we effectively defend against them doing that? Or how do we ineffectively handle the situation so we know what not to do? So geometry,
Mhm.
like, okay, I know this rule works when I'm dealing with this type of shape. And then I apply this rule, and then I take the measurements from this shape, and then I plug them in, and then I figure out the answer. Or I can figure out the missing side of the triangle. I can figure that out. And then when we do geometric proofs, all we're doing is learning and practicing how to prove an argument, how to structure an argument based on facts, and not like just how I feel.
Right.
I feel like this. Like, feelings have value, but in many situations, like, feelings are not valuable in certain situations and in certain contexts. And sometimes our feelings become too prevalent.
Mhm.
The facts become irrelevant.
Right.
And then we get into a whole lot of trouble because of that. But what geometry can do is train us in terms of how to make a cogent and concise argument based on fact and based on rules that are verifiable by nature and by the universe. So then we can take that and we can run with it. We can apply that skill to other areas of our lives.
Mhm.
All of these things are like different ways that mathematics is a benefit. And I'm certain that that's why there's so much confusion in terms of mathematics, because anybody that like is well versed in mathematics, they'll tell you, anybody that's taught, they'll tell you it's not hard, or I should say it's not hard to teach people math. Once you have the content mastery yourself,
Mhm.
hard to teach it to other people.
Right.
Don't have the content mastery, that's a different story, right?
Right.
For people that have the content mastery, it's not hard to do. But then when you look at the schools, like, what are the conditions of the schools? What are the cultures of the schools?
Mhm.
Like, a lot of times you got children that have like different, math backgrounds, all in the same classroom together. Children that aren't ready to be in a mathematical class, in a math classroom. They don't know how to contribute to a conducive learning environment.
Mhm.
Children are thrown in together. It's a recipe for disaster. Anybody with like Ray Charles could see that that's not going to work, but they do it anyway. So it's like okay, those that are in control, they know what's going on, but it's clear, like, they don't really want people to learn math, because
No.
math is also a gatekeeper in this society. It's a gatekeeper to
Mhm.
opportunities. It's a gatekeeper toward career opportunities, toward certain majors, access to certain information. Um, because then it helps to maintain the status quo, because there's a lot of menial labor that needs to get done, and the people that control the society are like, well, we need people to. It's kind of like, it's basically social engineering, and it's like, it's uncomfortable, to say it sometimes, because people take it as a personal attack. Like,
Mhm.
if you work that actual job, then somebody may feel offended if you say, well, you know, this is menial labor, right? But a lot of times people end up working those jobs out of necessity,
Right.
because they didn't learn develop a certain skill set. And oftentimes some people will say, well, that's your fault. That's on you. And I think back to, one of the many things
Mhm.
Torrey said, poverty is well calculated. This is all engineered. They'll tell you, in this, like, rugged individualist society we live in, they'll kind of try to tell you that, okay, well, it's your own personal decisions that are the reason why, you're in this situation and you're in this circumstance. And the challenge with that is that it is true but
Mhm.
to an extent, though, to an extent, because a lot of people make certain poor decisions because those poor decisions were available to them. And those poor decisions actually seem like they made sense. But some people, they didn't even have really as much of an opportunity to make such a poor decision because of how their lives were structured. So these are all just, like I say, so the social engineering that we live within is very prevalent, and math is a key component. Math is very, very exclusionary. It's an exclusionary subject. So, and that's like, from an early age. And that's why like I advocate like using like the skills in the book and using the activities in the book to make math like second nature, right? Just kind of like how speaking the English language, if English is your first language, speaking English is second nature to you. So when
Mm-hmm.
school and they're in the ELA class, they may not have the same challenges that they have in the math class because they go into a math class and it's like, what is this? What is this? What is this? What is this? A lot of the stuff they've never seen before. But they go into ELA class and they're like, okay, I know that word. I know that
Right.
word. I've read that before. I heard my mom say that. I heard my dad say that. My grandmother says that word all the time. My grandpop says this word. Okay. But in math, it's like you go into math with almost no background, like a blank slate. So I don't want that for our people. I think that's one of the issues. And what this does is it meets people where they are. So even if you're a parent that has your own math anxiety and your own math phobia, then you can like kind of read through this book and say, okay, well, yeah, this is an everyday activity. Like, every time they come into the kitchen, they grab this snack or, so we can practice this when they do that. Or when we're riding in the car and we're changing the radio station, we can practice fraction with decimals. We can do those types of things. Or when we're riding in the car and we see the car in front of us and we look at their license plate and then we look at on their license plate and then we practice our addition facts or our subtraction facts, multiplication facts and division facts. We can practice on a regular basis. So we make the math like second nature. So when they go to school, if they go to school, then the school becomes a space for them to practice the skills that they learned in the home and in the community, and not the other way around. Because for very often, and this is how we were all kind of trained and programmed that we should outsource that responsibility to the school, especially because a lot of us have to go to work and work jobs. So we don't have the time to stay home and homeschool in a formal sense. So, but we got to figure out ways. So this book is also another way to think of it is it's for the parent that wants to homeschool. They know that homeschool is ideal, but they can't do it. So it's like, so I'm thinking of ways to like, okay, if you want to homeschool, but you actually can't, how can I, show you ways that while you're not homeschooling, but while you are in the time that you are spending with your children, how can you access teachable moments and create teachable moments with your children? And then, so they had that practice on a regular basis, because a lot of children like don't even like really practice math at all, and like at all.
Right.
That 1 hour a day in school, or 45 minutes or 55 minutes in school is the only time they really do any math. And that's if you want to be successful at math and you want to excel in math, you want to excel in this life and develop those critical thinking skills, that's nowhere near enough. That's a setup for failure. Like you'll never be able to achieve the goal of developing those critical thinking skills and developing those math skills if you're only doing that like 1 hour Monday through Friday. Like it just won't happen. And a lot of times you're not even really necessarily learning as much in that hour because of that math anxiety and math phobia, because you didn't have enough prior preparation. So when you went into the math class, because that's another thing, like it sounds foreign to a lot of us and it sounds strange to a lot of us that you would have to get prepared to go to math class. Whereas, because we've been conditioned to think that, well, I don't have to prepare my child for math class. No, the teacher went to college. The teacher is supposed to prepare my child and teach them everything and pour into them. That doesn't work though.
Right.
It never really has. And actually, a lot of the students that do well in those school settings are students that have a prior preparation. because they were doing like Saturday school or after school programs or summer programs, or they have parents that are like, very proactive, right? So what we got to do is, especially if we're dealing with, like we talk about the Imam Jamil Alameen, H. Rap Brown, his quote: "Anything that you don't control can be used as a weapon against you."
Woo.
You don't control the school system, then we can't trust it to provide our children with what they need. So, if we have to engage it, what I say is, if our children go there, then they should be going there just to practice what they've learned from us.
Right. Right.
Um,
And you write that in this book. I mean, it's right there in the introduction, because we had to make them understand that we are in control of it. Y'all just we seeing them to practice and to do these things, because that's why we get taken advantage of in that area. And when you were saying that, I had to look up that quote by Dr. Amos Wilson. If you want to know the source of a problem in America, look who's making money from the problem. So you
exactly.
want to understand the math fear and the math phobia in the Black community, who's making that money. And it's just like Brother Edward Hawkins commented. He said, we don't even understand that we think we benefiting by getting like food stamps and all these things, but we're really paying taxes, and they're using your tax dollar to find, to fund these different things. So, if you understand the math, you'll understand that, it's really not a quote benefit. It's something that people need to be having, to make it. So, just understanding the math. And then I want to talk about some of the chapters in your book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the first chapter is candy fractions, and talking about using Kit Kats and Reese's cups, and are these concepts that you came from that you got from your day to day on how you help teach your children and things of that nature?
Yeah, just different things that I experimented with, with my own children, or some things I might have seen, seen other people doing, and I
Mm-hmm.
followed them. But I definitely have done this like with my children. And the purpose of this chapter is really in response to the fact that I've encountered so many students that just fractions were just the bane of their existence.
Right.
Hate fractions. They just hate fractions, don't like them. And I'm like, why don't y'all like fractions? Like, I like fractions. I mean, I was fortunate. I had a good sixth grade teacher. I think it was my sixth grade teacher. Was my sixth grade teacher? Nah, it wasn't my sixth grade teacher. It was before that. I'm thinking of something else. I'm thinking of the number line. I learned the number line in sixth grade. But so that's when I got into like negative numbers and all that. That was sixth grade. But in elementary school, I learned fractions. Um, but I realized that like one of the things that would help to prevent more people and more young people from developing this like adversarial feeling or position toward fractions is if we incorporate fractions into our everyday language and just speak the language of fractions. So what I do in the book is I give a lot of examples where, like with the Kit Kat example, like so if it's 4 bars in the Kit Kat pack, right? Instead of like, giving your child, say, here's one piece. It is one piece, but let's talk about it in terms of a fraction. Let's say, okay, this is 1/4. One piece is 1/4, because again, what's the definition of a fraction? We have four equal parts, so that's our denominator. That's why our denominator is 4. The part that you're focused on in that moment is the numerator. So if I'm
Mm-hmm.
focused on one piece out of 4, that's 1/4. And I get that to the child, I get that to my son, I get that to my daughter. And it gets them acclimated toward the language of fractions. And then they're also learning the concept of fractions. So the hope is that if and when they go to school, it's like, oh, these are fractions. It's nothing to be uncomfortable about, it's a language issue. It's a language that I understand. So, and we can do it like, again, we're meeting people where they are, because we buy candy for our children. So we can take, I don't know, we might have some M&Ms, and we take out, child says, can I have some M&Ms? You say, yeah, sure, you can have some M&Ms. Matter of fact, bring me the pack and bring me a bowl too while you at it. So say, all right, bring a pack of M&Ms, bring a bowl. I rip open the pack, I pour out some M&Ms into the bowl. I might pour 7 M&Ms, and then I say, count how many M&Ms are in the bowl. They count them up. Say, okay, it's 7. Say, all right, cool. I'm gonna give you 3 of these. So don't just, but yeah, I'm giving you 3, but don't just think of it as 3. Think of that as 3 sevens, right? That's the fraction of the whole. And I think on a cultural level and on a deeper level, what this also does, what the embrace of fractions can do, is I think that it develops a sense of collectivism
Mm-hmm.
and communalism.
Mm-hmm.
Because instead of me thinking that I'm only an individual, I'm also part of a whole. I'm part of a group. Fractions can help you to see that. It's like, oh, it's not just about me. I'm part of something. Because with a fraction, again, what's the denominator is the first number that we focus in on. How many
Mm-hmm.
parts are there? So in a room full of people, we like, all right, well, how many people in here? Might be 25 people in a room. So that's our denominator, right? So then it's like if I'm one person, I'm not just one person, I'm also 125th. So the hope is that each of us is 125th and we can all come together and build something.
Like that.
It's like Ujima from Kwanzaa, from the
Mm.
Nguzo Saka,
Yeah.
collective responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
We're all a contributing, we're all a part of something greater than us, and we can contribute, to something greater. But we're using math. I'm using math as the foundation for that type of lesson.
Yeah.
And then hopefully, if that's done successfully, every time your child sees a fraction, hears a fraction, that core value of being part of a collective and wanting to work for the betterment of the larger group is reinforced in their mind. It's like they get triggered, like, oh yeah, yeah, because it's not just about me. As bad as I might want it to be just about me, it's really not just about me.
Mm-hmm.
It's about all of us.
Right.
And that's what I think about when I think about fractions. And, maybe it's quite possible that other people have realized this too. And, maybe that's why things have been done in curricula to cause children to try to avoid fractions.
Yeah.
Because maybe that's a more subliminal way of keeping us from organizing and uniting and thinking as a collective unit instead of only thinking of ourselves as rugged individuals. Who knows?
Who knows? And
Yeah.
and that's a great point because I fractions is really is tough. And I think it was I had a black teacher in the seventh grade, male teacher, that when I finally got it, I was like, oh, I got it. And and when you get it, it gives you a certain sense of confidence in what you can do. Because I feel like I could just conquer the world after I figured out, fractions. And so, one thing that you have made me more aware of, because I cook a lot, and sometimes I want to have my recipe, and
Mm-hmm.
it may call for a 3/4 cup or something. I'm like, well, I don't know what half a 3/4 is. So, just things like that, everyday fractions. I know here when we did Saturday school a couple months ago, we were making waffles. And I said, okay, y'all, we got to double the recipe. So that means we're going to have to, multiply every ingredient times two, whatever it was. So we had a whole math lesson right there, making our waffles here at the center. And uh, there are chapters on it, on how you can incorporate math skills in every day. And it's really what Akil said. If you start incorporating math into everything you do,
Right.
uh, it'll make your us and our children more comfortable when it comes to math, and we can get rid of that phobia. Because he and I talked about, I actually chapter 7, should we fly or drive?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was telling you, I was trying to plan a trip to Charlotte, and I was trying to, figure out how my money was going to money
Right.
on the trip. And so, you get on there and you see these airline tickets $400 and $500. Like, okay, well, how far is Charlotte and about how much am I gonna need? And one thing it reminded me of was my father. He used to love to see how much gas he could get out of a tank, how many, what the mileage was on there. You even had that in here.
Yeah.
So,
That's it.
yeah, it's not only for your children, it's for you. It's for you. And Sister Juanita Cummins, she did ask a question, for parents who aren't proficient in math. Is there some way that you can help them? And I did post your YouTube channel, and I want to share my screen because I want people to actually see it, and you can kind of direct us through it
Mhm.
uh, as I share the screen. Uh, so
And I
this
al-
is.
I want to ask a question to
Mhm.
in response to the sister's question. I want us to think about how we know that we're not either are proficient or are not proficient in math. I want us to think about that because a lot of us make these assumptions, and I'm wondering where we're getting this idea from.
Mm.
Because the question, it's like, asking the question like who to like when Malcolm said, another
Mhm.
post, like who told you to hate yourself? Who taught you to hate
Right.
yourself? Right.
Right.
So I wondered a question like who told you you weren't good at math? And
Mm.
good, like good is like, how do you quantify that? How do you quantify like so for if a person says that they're not proficient at math, what would they have to do to be able to consider themselves proficient? Or for so these just things I wonder, and like different people might have different answers. Like of course I consider myself proficient. That's because I've done a whole lot of problems right over the years. I've got some problems wrong though, but I think I've done a lot more correct than I've done wrong. But for some people, I think for some people I think it goes back to their school experience. The school
Mhm.
experience, they might have got a low grade or they might not have really understood something, as well as they thought they should have. But I always offer this example, something to think about. The issue of partial credit comes into play because some teachers give partial credit, even if you got the wrong answer. Some teachers don't.
Mhm.
I see value in both approaches because you want to strive for perfection. You want to learn how to check your work and be correct, and be precise. But the problem with that sometimes is that the student doesn't know either how close they might have been to the right answer.
Mm.
Because if the problem has 6 steps and they made a careless, especially if you make a careless mistake, you make a careless mistake on step 4 and you forget a negative sign, or
Mhm.
like you were supposed to do 8 divided by 2, and instead of writing 4, you wrote 6. You made a mistake and did 8 minus 2 because you might have been working too fast. You might actually be proficient, but you might have been working too fast and just made a careless error, and then that throws off everything else in the problem. But your procedure is correct though, but you got the whole problem wrong. So
Mm.
take quizzes or have taken quizzes when you were in middle school or when you was in high school and you got low grades because your teachers didn't give you partial credit. But then so you see that number, you're like, oh, I got a 40 on this quiz, I got a 58 on that quiz, I got a 62 on this quiz, because there's no partial credit. But if you had got partial credit, you might have passed all them quizzes, right? But that wasn't
Mhm.
grading policy though. But yet those numbers are all you remember. So then you go through life and this compounded idea that, oh, I'm bad at math. When in fact, you're actually not bad at math. That's a myth. You're actually not bad at math. And I know this may not apply to everybody, but I'm sure there are a lot of people out there in that type of situation where they didn't really know, like they had a much greater amount of understanding than they thought they did.
Mhm.
But nobody
Mhm.
told them. Nobody
Mhm.
nobody told them. Nobody told them like you was right up to this point, or you had the right idea, but you was on the right track. Nobody sat down and had that conversation with them.
And I think some of it comes from, the Common Core curriculum too, because you helped me get over my phobia of the Common Core math. And because it's like every time I ran into it, I was like, oh no. And I would send you a picture and you would direct me to the video. And y'all, that's why the YouTube channel is so important, because it's down to earth language and you can understand why you're doing what you're doing and why the steps are necessary. So I think some of it is that Common Core too.
Yeah, and I'm trying to, and it is. I try to be down to earth and with the language, and I try to implement more of like an African centered type pedagogy
Yeah.
with a storytelling aspect. Because I want people to understand, like, okay, well, these problems are set up like this.
Mm-hmm.
This means this. And, I want it to be kind of like relaxed and comfortable so people will feel like they can do it. So then they'll remember the story that I told while I was going through the problem step by step. And then when you see the problem on your own, then you're able to produce. You're able to come up with the correct answer, you know? Um, that's the hope. Because I realized too, like I'm trying to make people feel that they can excel in math.
Mm-hmm.
And this way, because I know a lot of us, like I've been in classes before when I was younger, where I kind of like I'm looking at the teacher and I'm like, doing like as like the young people say, they're doing like a vibe check. I'm doing the vibe check of the room, and the way this room feel like it feel like I'm not supposed to be in here for whatever reason. I don't know whether it's the way the teacher is talking to us or talking to me when I ask a question, or the way I just but like again, like I'm feeling the vibe in the room, and I feel like I'm not supposed to be in here, or I'm feeling like this teacher doesn't think I'm supposed to be here learning this, or maybe he doesn't, he or she doesn't think that I'm equipped, and it's a feeling, and a lot of times our feelings are not accurate, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
like some other type of insecurity that has nothing to do with that particular moment that you're in might have been, triggered or whatever, but it's still valid. And there are ways that, people can make you feel certain kind of ways. So that's why I try to, like, on the YouTube channel, I try to, like, in my explanation and the way I explain things, I try to, like, get people to feel like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
get this. Yeah, this makes sense. I think I can do.
Yeah, for sure. Because I often tell the story, when I was helping a young lady with the box division. I was like, what in the world? And you directed me to the video with you and Asada. And we got it. And she watched the video with me, and watching Asada on the video, kept her engaged as well.
Yeah,
And I was telling you, I was watching this video right here, you and Kwame with the single digit, and I was cracking up. It's really cute, y'all. And it's really would be good for your 3-4 year olds too, because he's 4, right?
yeah. Kwame's 4. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. So
yeah. We
yeah,
start
and I
doing
love
that.
your children. You have your children on here.
Yeah, and I'm being intentional with that because I'm trying to also show like that. I'm a parent. Like I'm a
Mm-hmm.
professor and I'm a teacher, but I'm also a parent. And a lot of this stuff is like, it's stuff that I'm teaching my own children. So I'm kind
Right.
of modeling for you, like how you can show your children this stuff too. But speaking of the box method of division, I created like a hystematics lesson out of that. Did we ever talk about that?
We did not. Yeah, I wanted you to talk about hystematics
Yeah.
too.
So
Yeah.
a good example. So hystematics is when it's a framework that I've been developing, is where I use history to teach mathematics and also use mathematics in order to teach history. Because those are two of the major blind spots that our people have, like, mathematical proficiency and also historical awareness of our own
Mm-hmm.
experience, and not just our own experience, but the world, history of the world, right?
Right.
So with the box method, and I contrasted with the traditional long division algorithm, where with the box method, you know how like you draw the arrow and you put the number up to the right into the next column.
Mm-hmm.
So I was teaching this to a homeschool group, and it occurred to me, right, that this is a model of migration patterns.
Mm.
So while we're teaching the box method, we can personalize it because you can like have the young people think about or talk to their parents, grandparents, uncles, aunties about, okay, where did y'all are up in like my grandmother, one of my grandmothers, for example, she was born in Alabama, small town in Alabama called Roba, not too far from Mobile, I think, or Tuskegee. It's in that area.
Mm-hmm.
The family migrated up to New Jersey,
Okay.
but that was a northern migration, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people have those experiences, but then we have the reverse migration, right, back down
Right.
south. So when I was 7 years old, I was born in New York. When I was 7, my parents moved to Baltimore, so they went back down south. So that's something that can be applied. That reverse migration can be applied when we deal with long division, the long division algorithm, because after you do your subtraction, then you got to drop the number down from the dividend. You drop it down, right?
Mm-hmm.
You drop it down. I'm sorry, Sister Crystal. Hold on one second.
Okay. That's okay. I can take it from because we did a lesson on the Harlem Renaissance, and to kick off the lesson with the Harlem Renaissance, we talked about the Great Migration, and so that's why I went and grabbed when he said Great Migration. I went and grabbed our map because we actually went to look to see where most of the people from Mississippi migrated to. And Akil is so right in his that because my parents were born and raised in a small town in Arkansas, and they migrated to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where a lot of other people migrated to Chicago and things of that nature. So I went and pulled up our map, and that's great because now I can incorporate that math lesson into our Harlem Renaissance lesson as well. And we can talk about the reverse migration too, because we talked about the Great Migration when we did our unit on the Harlem Renaissance, and so we looked and talked about where most of the people that were in Harlem came from, and so that was interesting because they didn't realize that that's how so many of our family members are up north. Because I was telling them, and while you were going, I was telling them that my family migrated from Arkansas to Milwaukee. I was born in Milwaukee, and my dad came back down south when I was 10 years old. So it was something that, interested them as well because they don't realize that, there was exodus from the south and now
Right.
there's one back down this way. So
Right.
yeah, that's great. Yeah.
So, and when it kind of came to me, it was like the ancestors, like, working through me. Like when it just kind of like popped in my head, I'm like,
Mhm.
'cause I'm sitting there and I'm doing the problem and I'm drawing the lines and I'm like, wait a minute, this feels familiar. And
Mm,
they're like, oh, this is, what it is? It's like this number is migrating up north, right? Or when we do long division, this number in long division is migrating down south. That's what's happening. And then it's a way to like, so you connect the historical experience of our people directly with the mathematics, and it's very organic. And then
mhm,
so again, it's implementing like the storytelling aspect into mathematics. And it's, like I said, it's organic and it makes sense. And then it makes the math easier to remember those steps. It makes them easier to remember, right? And it also makes it very easy to remember because every time you're doing math, you're thinking of the history. And every time you're thinking about the history and conversing about it, you're thinking about the math. And everything is all interconnected.
right.
And really everything is like it's interdisciplinary. I think that's another way that
Mhm,
Western education just like attempts to confuse us anyway by like compartmentalizing everything, right?
right.
Um, and it's just it's just like it's just a lot of we gotta blur those lines anyway
Yeah,
and
you do.
decompartmentalize intentionally, our educational process and our educational methods, and that's really what hystematics is. So
Mhm,
hystematics is a way for, and you'll see the hystematics examples or framework implemented in the book, like when you were talking about the chapter 7, should we drive or fly? I had practice problems in not every chapter, the 20 chapters
mhm.
in the book, but I had practice problems in most of the chapters. And at the end of chapter 7, for practice, I tell you to plan a trip via
Yeah.
drive air from your city to the following cities. So number one, I choose Atlanta, right? Um,
Mhm.
Parentheses, I give a little information about Atlanta. I say it was once the headquarters of the Student Nonviolent Coordinator Committee.
Right.
So if you're not familiar with SNCC, now that's the opportunity for you to go do some research. Like I've introduced it to you, right? I didn't tell you anything about it. I just tell you, what I mentioned it, right?
Mhm.
Was Chicago, number 2, Chicago. And, tomorrow is the first day of Black August. So this is relevant to
Well,
this person, George Jackson, right? Chicago was the birthplace of George Jackson. So I'm introducing people like number 3, Detroit, Michigan. Let's say you're planning a trip to Detroit, the birthplace of Chokwe Lumumba.
his
Chokwe,
birthday is August 2nd. Go ahead.
Repu- Republic of New Africa, and
Yeah.
free the land, and all of that. Mississippi. He was the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi. His son's the mayor now, right? So these are all like, his conversations that are steeped in history,
Mhm.
but with
Mhm.
mathematical calculations as a means to engage the history. Or you could say we're discussing and researching history as a means to engage the mathematical calculations.
Right.
So there's like a reciprocal relationship between the math and the history.
Yep. And number 4 is Coldwater, Mississippi, where
Exactly.
I
Oh,
am.
hello.
Home
Yeah.
Academy. Right here, y'all. And so yeah, because when I was working on the Henrietta Lacks unit, I actually incorporated something in there that I got from you. We put the numbers in there when she was born and the year she, transitioned. I'm like, okay, so how old was Henrietta Lacks when she transitioned? How old was her daughter, Deborah, when she transitioned? So they can, you ask, what's the function? What's the math function you're gonna be using to come up with that? And so, I got that from Brother Akil, so big shout out. So y'all want to get this book. I mean, it's like he said, you can practice, and then once you get the gist and hang of everything he's talking about, then you can create your own problems.
Exactly.
Uh, and
Exactly. Yeah.
one of the ones I really like is a chapter on the grocery store, because I think a lot of times we don't even realize the unit prices, and you say the unit price hustle. And so, me being the shop that I am, that's why I'm like, I'm not doing the online because I want to go in there and I want to look at the and see how much I'm actually paying for, what I'm getting and price per pound and all that. It really makes you think about the price of what you're paying for. And then I another one for me in the grocery store is the uh servings. I'm big on how many servings are in something too. And you had that in here as well. So it's everyday math usage and making it relevant to our life. And I think once we realize that it is relevant, what we do is relevant, we'll be more able to digest doing math and not have that phobia. I
Yeah.
want to read Brother Patrick. He said, "This is why Brother Kill is a weapon of mass destruction of white narratives, and he's essential for nation building." And I couldn't agree with that more because I've been knowing you for a minute, and I'm gonna tell y'all the consistency and the deliberateness of what Brother Kia does is so important. It is so important, and I mean, I always tell people y'all need to subscribe to all this math. You need to go on there and check it regularly because you post videos pretty frequently and regularly.
Yeah.
So,
Actually,
mm,
me and Asada just recorded a video earlier today before she went to dance practice. Um, but I actually hadn't posted in like a few weeks. Um,
mm.
but with Kwame was the last one I did. Like that was like maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. Because I've just been doing a lot of traveling and promoting the book and the YouTube channel and whatnot. But yeah, August is going to be. I'm gonna kind of go kind of hard in August to make up for lost time. You
And
know.
back to school. I think it's a great time. You can get that head start too. Start right now for familiarizing yourself with the YouTube channel, All This Math, so that you can better help your children with their math. It's something that we got to start practicing every day. So, I was telling Brother Akil, my granddaughter, she learned her multiplication table over the summer. So she's going in with a confidence, like I already know. We did our assessment test, and I know I outscored everybody because I already know my stuff. And today she's like, we rounded numbers, and my Gigi, that was just super easy. So having the math skill, because she said that she wanted to be a great at math. That was her resolution for 2023 is to be great at math. And I thank Brother Akil because just hearing me talk about you and then meeting you at the summit, it
Yeah.
really like did something for her. Speaking of, we will be hosting our 7th annual Building Power Summit in Jackson this year, and Brother Akil is going to be there. He's going, of course, we want him to speak, and we're going to be doing a book signing. So if you're in the state or if you plan on coming to the summit, that's where you could grab a book and have Brother Akil sign it for you. I'm gonna have mine ready for him to sign. Also, I wanted to go ahead.
I feel important. People.
Yeah, you are important. You are a weapon. You are a weapon, man. You are a math weapon. And so, it and you said you always add the culture, man. You go to his YouTube, he's gonna have on the HBCU shirt, or he's gonna have on an
Yeah.
ancestor across his chest. Is always gonna be culture, man. He
Mhm.
had inspired me at one point. I'm like, dang, I need to get me some HBCU attire. So I was like, trying to figure, find people who I knew were at HBCUs and grab me a shirt, and so I can start repping like you, because we need that, especially now in this climate.
Definitely.
Uh, we need that, and we need that cultural understanding because, like you said, once you start thinking about it, the numbers and the historical significance of a lot of these numbers, it makes it more interesting, and our children are more engaged as well. And I'm gonna tell you another thing about his videos. When you go and watch his video, he's gonna explain the math jargon to you, the
Yeah,
math terminology as well.
yeah, definitely. Because like one of the things I noticed in terms of like reflecting on my own practice earlier in my career, I made a mistake that a lot of math teachers make is that we take it for granted that like students understand the terminology already, or
Mm-hmm.
even if they know it, they might have forgot. So a lot of times I like to be very explicit and say, well, what does this term mean? What is a variable? What's an expression? Because a lot of times people interchange terms that they shouldn't, and it
Right.
problems, down the road. So I try to like, really break it down. And again, like it's like storytelling. I'm telling you, like, you got to know what the words mean in order to understand the story, because
Right.
every is like a story. From one step to the next. Each step to the next step is a scene, right? So each scene, it's got to make sense. One scene to the next. So when it ceases to make sense, that's when the problems start, and that's when you start to feel like this seems kind of crazy. I don't really get it, you know. But yeah, I just try to make it. I try to make it make sense, and I want everybody to just come to the YouTube channel. My goal is actually to teach math to the entire Black community. That is my goal. That is my goal, and I'm using the internet. With the internet, I think it's much more feasible. You
Yeah.
know, because I don't have to physically be everywhere. Because I can't physically be everywhere. But with the internet, the videos are there even when I'm not present. Even when I'm asleep, the videos are there. You could be watching it. It could be in any country. As long as you have internet access.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and you can get the support that you need. And it's free. The YouTube is free.
Right. Dr. Elizabeth Miles says, what are some tips students can use to learn their multiplication? Is there a video on that?
I think I have, on the multiplication methods playlist. There's a playlist called multiplication methods,
Mm-hmm.
and also have addition methods, subtraction methods, division methods. But there's some different examples of multiplication. But in terms of just memorizing the multiplication table, on my website, I also have some blank multiplication table templates that you can print out. And what I would say is one of the best strategies for memorizing multiplication facts is even if you use a calculator, even if your child uses a calculator, just to like fill in the multiplication table, and then over time they start to develop the memory. You know, um, it's just daily practice, just like with sports. Math is like a sport. Math is a lot of things. Math is like math is a language. Math is like sports. There are different ways to conceptualize math in general, and I would say definitely make sure you practice on a regular basis. So many people fall behind and aren't able to excel in math, mainly because they don't practice it on a regular basis. You got to practice on a regular basis. Outside
Yep.
of school, outside of school.
Outside of school, and that's the key. Because a lot of times when my children were in school, I would tell them to study. They're mad, and they were like, "We can't study." I'm like, "Yeah, you practice it. You just start
Yeah,
practicing. You work problems and just practice, and that's how you study. So you can get the conceptual part down, like you said."
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Got to get the concept.
Got to get it down.
Mhm.
So y'all, we've been on for a minute, so I'm gonna start winding down. But brother Kill, if you had to tell somebody any just that one thing about math, if they just are adamant, because I work with college students, and they just hate math, just hate it, and they do say, I don't even know why we got to do all this, why we got to take college algebra, why we got to do all this, and so I do tell them that math, we math is a constant in our life, but I don't think that's a sufficient answer that I can give them. What's something that I could tell
Well, for college students, I would just be very candid and very like direct and explicit with them, and just let them know that math is generally it's used the way it's used in formal society and in institutions.
Mm-hmm.
It, it's a tool of exclusion because
Okay.
math becomes like it's a gatekeeper, right? It's this course that you can give to people that you already know they're underprepared, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're underprepared because of their K through 12 experience, and we can we can infer that most people are going to be underprepared or unprepared, right, for math classes in college. But once I get a record of the fact and it's documented that you failed this math class in college or you did poorly in this math class in college, now I can, through social engineering, I can maneuver you in a certain direction in society. So, you basically got to like, what I would tell college students is like, stop letting these people play with you.
Mm-hmm.
Stop letting these people play with you and like manipulate your life, and do whatever you have to do to figure out how to excel in math class, in a math class that you have to take. Do whatever you got to do, whether you got to get private tutoring, whether you got to use the free resources on campus, whether you have to use my YouTube channel. Definitely use my YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
Because I talk about, that's why some of my videos get kind of long, because I get into the the politics and these realities that don't often get discussed on a lot of education podcasts, or sometimes they do get discussed on the education podcast, but sometimes the people don't really, that's the extent of it
Mm-hmm.
happening, but not really doing anything. So what I'm trying to do is, I created the channel because I wanted to do something about all of these things that have been unearthed and that we know is going on in the society and in the community and in the school. So I would tell the college students to like, stop letting these people manipulate your lives. Stop letting these people manipulate your future. Definitely go learn some math. There are a lot of resources available. Um, you know, definitely go do that. Um, and once you make that commitment, then you'll start to realize, like, if you get the right teacher, the right tutor, start to realize, like, okay, it's not that bad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
and I think that that happens because they have the math lab, but I don't think it's just I think going through the motions with the tutoring they had. You know that's why I appreciate you so much because you really do have the passion and it's shown when when we're on the channel because I remember one day I had gotten to the library early and like I shared on Facebook there was a young black male student sitting out there and I didn't have my keys and I was like I ain't going back out there to get my keys out the car. And so we started talking and he told me that he had to take the ACT because of his math score. And so I was like, okay, I'm pulling out my phone. Like you need to check out my good brother's YouTube channel, all this math. And so he left with that uh resource. And he was like all excited because he was like, oh man, just checking out everything. I said, you see that HBCU? I was all into it as well because he did say that he was gonna go on to I think it was Jackson State. And so yeah, so yeah, Sister Mila, Brother Akil is the best. He really is. And like Brother Patrick said, definitely a weapon, committed to the black community. I mean, he states that right in the introduction of the book. He is committed to us, y'all. And speaking of, I am going to be giving away a copy of How to Use All This Math, Volume 1. Uh, so if you cash app Oasis L $1, I am going to pull a name tomorrow, and give away a copy of all this math. And I'm telling y'all, it's not just a copy, it's a tool, it's a weapon, it's everything you need to get you on track of to feel comfortable with math and get rid of that phobia. I heard Brother Kill say one time he is committed to doing away with the accepted math deficiency in
right.
our community. Yeah. it's accepted. And so we had to, and because I feel the same way about reading and literacy as well. You know, we don't read like we should, and I'm committed to saying, hey, you do like to read, you just haven't found the right book yet.
Yeah.
you know,
I,
so yeah, because there's some good stuff out there, and once you find that book, you know, you start, like Marvin Collins said, you get that spark, and you just keep on until that fire is roaring in you. So yeah, so I'm gonna be giving away a copy of All This Math, and then the three winners of the summer read challenge will also be receiving a copy of All This Math, because yeah, you need to have it in your home. If you don't have it, Brother Kia, tell them how they can get a copy of All This Math.
so currently it's available on Amazon, but I plan to I'm researching some other distribution channels, but currently it's available on Amazon. So you can go on Amazon in the search bar and type in how to use all this math, or type in my name, Akil Parker, and it'll pop up. You know, my Amazon book page will pop up.
I'm gonna see if I can find it right quick so I can put the link in the chat, because you need to have it in your library. And like I said, you know, if you come to the summit, bring your copy with you so you can get it signed, or I'm sure you'll have some copies there as well. You'll have some copies there. Let me see if I can get the one. Uh-oh.
Yeah, I did.
Let's see. I'm trying to get it in the comments. Thank you, Sister Mila, for putting that cash app um, up so we can get these people in on this raffle. This is probably one of the best raffles we've had as far as book giveaways. Yeah, I'm serious, because y'all know how I am about my books, but this one right here is beneficial in so many ways, because there are uses that you there are ways you can use math that you don't even think about. You know, I the license plates one, you know, all that, because I'm real big on reading license plates and all that, because you know I'm in Mississippi, so they had the counties across the bottom, so I always like to look at the counties where people are from while I'm traveling in the state. But just adding the numbers and all that, and then creating what would you call it for the letters? Is that algebra?
Um, what is the word for that? Well, I did think about um, the corresponding numbers for the letters. If you want to like get deep with it, like because A could correspond with the number one, since it's the first letter of the alphabet. B could correspond with two.
Yeah.
C can correspond with three, and so on and so forth. I mean, if you wanted to go that far, um, you know, but again, like, you know, don't ever feel limited by like just, you know, what I suggest, you know, in the book. You know, this is like, you know, it's this is yours. You know, that I'm just giving suggestions. You know, and that's how education works. And you know, these are your children. Like, you know, your children better, you know, better than I do. I may not know your children at all, right? So you know what works best for them. But these are just some suggestions, just to like kind of send you on your way in terms of like, you know, incorporating mathematics into your household on a regular everyday basis. So mathematics can be part of their, like, you know, their general regular experience, as opposed to the way it is for so many people. It's like, we don't do math in the house, we don't do math at home, we don't do math in the car. You do math in school for that 1 hour. When I send you to school, that's when you do math. And or if you have homework, you come home and you do that homework. Once the homework is done, then you know we don't do no other math. At least that's the mindset, right? Um, yeah, at least that's the mindset. And a lot of times we're doing a lot of math, but we don't know how much math we're actually engaged in. You know, one thing real quick before I go, because I got to go pick Asada up, and you know
Okay.
she's the star of the YouTube channel. She told me this today. You
There
know,
she is.
she told me she's the star. I was like, I don't want no smoke. It's cool. But um, a lot of times when we use the English language, we're using mathematical concepts. Like when we say something like something was not bad. Not bad is a double negative. So you know what
Mm-hmm.
that means? It means something positive. It means you liked it, right? That's a
Mm-hmm.
mathematical concept. Like
Mm,
when you apply a negative number times a negative number, the product will always be positive.
right.
You know, or if somebody says no problem, you say, thank you for doing this for me, and the person responds says, oh, no problem. Another double negative, no, and problem. Problem is something negative. No is a negative statement, right, or a negative word. That's a double negative. It means it's all good. That's why we know how to interpret that. It's like, okay, it's all good. It's positive. So there are a lot of conventions in the English language, the way we use it, especially the way we use it,
Right.
that are modeled after or are very similar to algebraic processes.
Mm,
So if you think about it like that, then it'll make you think like, wait a minute, okay, so wow, I'm really using algebra when I just talk.
mm,
You are. But if nobody ever told you that, you might not think that.
right. See what I'm
But
talking
you do.
about? See what we talking about when we talk about brother Akil as a weapon? Because those are concepts and ideas that we don't even think about, that we just take for granted. So again, this is his YouTube channel, All This Math. Y'all need to go on and get on there and subscribe so that you can stay updated. And he has a playlist on there. He has several playlists on there. I looked through some of those playlists myself, and then if you have a problem, just let him know. I just take a picture of it and shoot him a text, and he'll tell me where to go on the YouTube channel. And so, again, there's no excuse. Brother Kill is committed and dedicated. So is there anything else you have any parting words for our viewers?
Yeah, just take ownership of your children's education. Take ownership of your children's education, and be confident and be encouraged that you can teach them math and you can help develop them mathematically. By whether it's by using the YouTube channel or using the content from the book, and just be confident and be encouraged, regardless of your own personal experience and what it has been in the past.
I say. All right. Until next time, until September probably. We'll be seeing you and enjoy it and tell Asada she is the star. All
Right.
right. All right. Have a good one, brother Key. Appreciate you.
You too.